Hello and welcome to the Luke Lunchtime Takeaway. Week by week, we're going through Luke's Gospel, looking at the claims of Jesus, the words, the miracles, the sayings of Jesus, and putting together a picture of who Jesus is. Now, of course, Luke is a master editor as he brings his Gospel together. He is a doctor, Dr. Luke, and he has carefully researched an orderly account of the claims of Jesus. And he's written it down so that you and I can be certain about the claims that are made of Jesus. In some passages, we get a long story. We get a whole parable, or we get a long story of an encounter between Jesus and one individual. But in the passage we're looking at today, in the second half of Luke 9, we've got four little stories put together like a sort of mosaic. And Luke is doing that for effect, because when you thread them together, they have a combined message. And the question he's dealing with is this: why do we always want to be in first place? Why can't I always have the fame and glory? We want to be the center of attention, and yet that isn't Christian. And that's a very big problem for us if we are driven by that selfish ambition. And Luke takes four stories and arranges them to answer that question. Remember from last week, Jesus was up on the mountain being transfigured into his heavenly glory, and this was witnessed by Peter, James, and John. And then Luke tells us here in verse 37 that on the next day, so at a very specific point in history, he could say on one day Jesus was transfigured. It wasn't just a mythical appearance. It actually historically happened. And the next day, he's down in the town with the crowds, and the first of these four episodes happens. And they're going through the town, and there's a big crowd, and out of the crowd, a man cries out. And this is what he says, verse 38. "Teacher, I beg you to look at my son, for he is my only child. And behold, a spirit seizes him, and he suddenly cries out. It convulses him so that he foams at the mouth, and shatters him, and will hardly leave him. And I begged your disciples to cast it out, but they could not." Now, that's a surprise, because at the beginning of the chapter, Jesus has given his disciples the power to cast out demons in his name. So what's gone wrong? What have they done in this situation that they cannot cast out this demon? I think the problem is that they've got so used to doing that they've started to do it in their own strength, and therefore they've failed. And Jesus cries out, verse 41, "O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you and bear with you? Bring your son here." So while the man brings his son to Jesus, the demon takes the son again and convulses him and throws him to the ground, and he is bruised and battered again. And Jesus takes the boy and he commands the demon to leave him. And then he takes him and he heals his wounds, and the boy is fully restored to his father. And then Luke adds, verse 43, "And all were astonished at the majesty of God." The majesty of the power of Jesus was in huge contrast to the weakness of his disciples. They couldn't do anything. They were sort of knocking on the door and getting no reply. And suddenly Jesus is in command of the whole situation. And while they're filled with wonder, suddenly there's a gear change. And Jesus says something really startling, really shocking. "Let these words sink into your ears. The Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men." This is the second piece of the mosaic. Jesus is teaching them a really important principle. The glory of Jesus will be revealed most of all in his moment of greatest weakness, when he allows himself to be arrested and scourged and beaten and crucified, and he will die. He will die in the place of sinners. He will take our death. We, as rebels against God, deserve to die, deserve to be punished by God, but God places the punishment on Jesus in his death. And right at the heart of the Christian faith is this principle, that God's strength is made perfect in weakness, that he uses the weak things of the world to confound the strong, and the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. The cross provides the shape for the whole of our Christian faith. And there's a key principle of humility to learn right there at the heart of it. But that then brings me to the third part of the mosaic, which is immediately after that. The disciples of Jesus are having a conversation, and they really haven't got it. And they're bantering with each other, and they're arguing, which of us is the greatest? And I imagine that Peter, James, and John might be saying, well, look, we went up the mountain and we saw the transfiguration of Jesus. And maybe some of the others are saying, oh, no, we cast out far more demons than you have. So God's power rests more on us. And they're all having this argy-bargy. And Jesus takes a child and places the child next to him. And he says to them, verse 48, whoever receives this child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. For he who is least among all of you is the one who is great. Here are the disciples with all their proud boasting, and Jesus points to the child, and he says, look, if I sent this humble child in my name, and you received this child as sent by me, you would be therefore receiving me. And you would be accepting that I had sent this child. The same applies to you. It doesn't matter who you are. What matters is that you are sent in my name. It's not about the one whom I send. It's about my power working in them. You must learn to be the least important. And you must learn that your greatness rests and depends entirely upon my power working in you. And then in the final piece of the mosaic, there's a man who is so humble that Luke doesn't even bother to tell us his name. And this man has been working in the name of Jesus. And the disciples meet him and they find that he is casting out demons in the name of Jesus. And it's actually happening. Now, of course, Luke has recorded this story as the last story in the mosaic to sort of balance out the first one, where the disciples met the man whose son was demon-possessed and they couldn't do anything about it. Now here is the man with no name, and he's actually succeeding in casting out demons in the name of Jesus. Now, elsewhere in Luke's gospel, Jesus says this in chapter 11, whoever is not with me is against me. And what he means by that is that if you're going to work in God's power, you need the power of Jesus with you, and you need to surrender to Jesus. If you want to perform miracles, but you don't want to pay any attention to Jesus, forget it. You are not on the side of God, and you will not have God's power. But here he says to his disciples, do not stop him, for the one who is not against you is for you. What Jesus is saying is, look, this man with no name, he may not be part of our close-knit band of disciples, but he's heard my message and he believes in me and he's doing these deliverances in my name. So he is one of us. He may be a nobody, but my power rests on him. And that's the lesson for the disciples. It's not about who you are. It's about the power of God changing your life and empowering you to serve him. It's not about us having the fame and glory. It's about learning the strength of weakness. So put these four lessons, these four parts of the mosaic together. The demon-possessed boy could not be delivered by the disciples, but Jesus cast out the demon. He can only be healed by the power of Jesus. And the power of Jesus is shown most of all in his weakness, in his death, in his dying for us. Therefore, we should not boast about ourselves. We should learn to have the attitude of a little child and realize it's not about us. But if we trust in Jesus, his power can rest upon us and he can use us in his kingdom. Just like he did the man with no name in the final part of the story. He could cast out demons, even though we hardly know who he is. We don't know his name. He's very anonymous. And we are weak. We are feeble people if we're Christians. We should be anonymous. It's not about us. But if the power of Jesus rests upon us, then we can serve him and we can be of use in his kingdom. That is a radical message because it turns upside down the whole culture of fame and glory and celebrity and everything that focuses upon us. Now, we're going to take a break from Luke's Gospel over the summer, and we're going to come back, God willing, in September. When we come back, the next part, verse 51 of chapter 9, is where, if you like, Luke's Gospel takes a new turn. And Jesus sets out on his journey to Jerusalem. He knows he's going to be taken up to heaven, and he knows that the only way for that to happen is for him to go to his cross. So he sets his face to go to Jerusalem. And when we come back in September, that's what we plan to be looking at together. Thank you for joining me today. Have a great summer, and I hope to see you in September.